Hey everyone, it's Christopher Swan, and welcome to this week's episode of Living Your Journey. Each week, I have this amazing opportunity to chat with people that love what they do in life. They understand their passions and their direction. Maybe it's a career path or it's the social impact that they're making. It's kind of like they're following the North Star, but they know their story may change, and they understand that they're on a journey every day. This week, I talk with Henri Hebert. Henri's a longtime television producer specializing in reality TV. She's worked on shows like The X Factor, Biggest Loser, and The Jacksons' Next Generation. This is where our stories start, and we uncover the reality of what it's like in TV producing careers, and how this fueled Henri's desire to find a much better balance in life. The heart of our conversations is about how Henri found herself malnourished, dealing with a bout of pneumonia, and a giant realization that she was putting her basic needs and happiness second to her career. We talk through her aha moments, which sparked a change in her life, why she co-founded the Dee Dee Jackson Foundation with the Jackson family, and her new path of whole health approach, and how she's starting to share what she's learned with everyone else. I think this is a perfect conversation for anyone thinking about what's next for yourself. And of course, it's great timing with the start of a new year. Everyone, meet Henri. Henri, it is so great to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Good. So I mentioned this earlier to you when we chatted a couple days ago. I think our conversation is perfect timing. It's the start of the new year, and I think your story is really going to resonate with people who are thinking about more of a centered life. And I've been thinking about kind of your story. I think you have so many great aspects of it, and I think of it as like this journey of discovery and evolution, kind of like finding the balance and maybe your center and how to integrate them into like passions and meaning. So I know you're going to explain it in a much better way, but that's what I've been thinking about. So with that said, I wanted to jump into kind of your past world, your TV work, because you've been a long time TV producer. So maybe if we could jump in there, you could describe for us a little bit of your background with TV production, but really what I want to know is the life and reality of what it's like to work in TV as a producer.
Whew, I don't know if everybody's really ready for that. It might break the illusion.
Well, maybe just a little snippet of truth.
Well, first of all, let me just start at, I was born and raised in Massachusetts, and I always knew since the age of 5 that one day I was going to work in TV, and I always had a dream of moving out to California. That being said, nobody ever told me once you have obtained your dream that the next step was to then look at your next dream and kind of revisit your goals. So once I graduated from college and I packed all my bags, raised enough money to get a one-way plane ticket to California, I got off the plane in LA and I was like, yes, this is the start of my life. I've done it. Here I am. And I thought immediately that I was going to be in this space of bliss, and I was going to be living in purpose, and everything was just going to come together.
I love that. Exactly. It just happens.
I was like, yes. I have my college degree. Here I am, world. Yeah, not so much. That really didn't happen. In fact, my 20s, I felt like I was sold a bill of goods that just kind of took me down this path. I got my first job in television during the O.J. Simpson trial inside edition American Journal. They went from having 2 people working in their office to overnight needing like 100, it seems. And so I was fortunate that 2 weeks into moving to L.A. from Boston, I had a job, but yet at the same time, I think I just accepted a job just to accept a job, thinking that, oh, it's in TV, so I'm immediately going to love it. And I got into the workplace, and it was not anything that I thought it was going to be. And granted, I think now I look back and I realize, I had a lot to learn in terms of skills and tools and I had a preconceived notion of what my dream would be, not realizing what it means actually to allow yourself the space and permission to learn. And I think if somebody had sat me down back then and said, "Hey kid, chill. This is the learning process. Just enjoy learning and growing." I think I would have been less anxious to reach that mountaintop, because eventually when I did reach the mountaintop, I was like, wait, this is really it? And so let me explain what really working in television's like. It's hard, grueling work. You tend to work long hours. It can be, between 12 and sometimes 18 hours a day. Usually it's a 6-day work week. Sometimes it can be 7 days. And I chose the side where I was going to be a producer. And as a producer, you really are the one that kind of glues it all together. And, not only are you involved in the pre-production where you kind of conceive the plan and the creativity, you're the one that then executes it in production and then takes it home in the end to create it. And that's what gets outputted into your television set, or now through the digital sources. But I found I loved producing. I loved all aspects of it, the organization, the creativity. And for me, I chose to be a reality TV producer, and I loved learning about people's stories. I loved, interviewing real people. I loved going all around, the country and meeting people and dropping into their space. And so that aspect was really, really, truly inspiring to me. Yet at the same time, the workload, it definitely took a toll on me, because 18-hour days, 7 days a week, it became long weeks where then my whole life kind of went, out of balance in other areas. And I think, again, if I had sort of more of a mentor early on, where they kind of sat me down and said, okay, this is kind of what happens in life, and let me guide you to sort of help you move towards this, because when you get to it, here's some tools. But I didn't really know. I thought, this is just life. This is what you do. You accept a job and you have a job to do, you do it. So I do it until it's finished. And, I have a pretty strong work ethic. But with that comes, our bodies really aren't meant to work 7 days a week, 18-hour days. So there definitely was a toll on the other side.
And you were doing this for years, too. It wasn't just like you were this producer for a couple of years. This kind of grueling schedule went on and on and on. Is that right?
Yes, for years. And, and I think when you're young, when you're in your 20s and your 30s, you don't really, it's exciting, and you don't really notice. But the challenge is, though, you're then creating a habit for yourself, and it becomes a space where you get so used to it. I got so used to just getting up immediately in the morning and, dressing, rushing out, going to the coffee shop, getting my latte, drinking my latte on the way to work, getting to work, being on the go, that next thing you know, years later, I realized, wow, I don't even take time for breakfast. And then you realize, I don't even know how to make coffee at my house. How is that possible? How did that happen?
Oh, I know it's not funny at all, but it's because I can kind of relate to some of this. So listen, I know, because we've talked about this too, because it sounds like it's all like, yeah, you worked a lot. I don't, just for people that are listening, like you work crazy hours and you literally weren't eating. And here's something I have a question on too, because I know there's a couple of different moments or milestones of this, but you needed a change clearly.
Clearly something wasn't working.
Right? Because you, like I said, I know you weren't eating and stuff at points either, but I'd love for you to maybe even describe maybe like that final wake-up call that you knew you needed to change. Because I know there's a couple big ones there, but maybe you could help us understand like how bad that really got for you, that that you needed to change what you were doing.
Well, I think you mentioned the not eating. Maybe I should explain first what was happening.
Well, I think people probably can relate to that stress piece, but yeah, for sure, please.
I mean, apparently coffee isn't nutritional enough for a breakfast source. So I was really pushing myself physically, mentally, emotionally to the point where I was so depleted nutritionally because, in terms of just setting myself on a pace, my stress, when I get stressed, I'm not hungry. So my adrenaline is just on the go. And as a producer, your job is to, just execute and problem solve. And so you're on the go. And I found that, at the end of the day, if I looked back, I would have a cup of coffee or maybe two for breakfast. And then for lunch, sometimes I would eat like a bag of chips. And then I would get home and, I would have some sort of to-go meal from either Whole Foods or I was in a rut that I was actually eating pizza rolls, which
I forgot about that. That's awesome. Not really, but well, that I guess that used to have nutrition in them at one point.
yeah, and so I was like, how am I really adulting here? And meanwhile, I'm a producer. And so I've produced cooking shows. I worked on Biggest Loser. I know about nutrition and body and health. And I can produce, multiple scenes on, what people should be doing. But yet I was so in the flow of just this workflow that I just was this cog, just keep going and circling, that I realized, and I mean, I didn't even realize it. It's as you said, I had a wake-up call. And the wake-up call came when I had been doing this show for TLC, and I'd been on the road for 3 months straight. And every 2 or 3 days, we were on and off airplanes all across the U.S. And we would go and shoot an entire 15 minutes of a show. It was a 30-minute show. And so we'd go and shoot an entire 15 minutes of a show in one city and then move on to another to shoot the other 15 minutes. And by the end of the 3 months, I just was so exhausted on all levels. And I was in LA, I was back in LA for 2 days, and I was driving to my final day on set, and I felt feverish, and I called up the production company executive and I said, I've never done this before, but I'm really not feeling well. I think I need to go to the doctor. And I said, can someone, cover me on set? And I've never called in for sick actually on a location day. I'd never done that in my 20 plus years of working. And so I went to the doctor, and the doctor was like, you have pneumonia. You have to go home. And I was like, but I got to go to set. And he's like, no. He's like, you're running 102 fever. You need to go home. And I was like, oh, okay.
Okay, sure. Whatever.
What does that mean? I'm like, you mean I can't go to work? And he's like, no, you can't go to work. You're actually really sick. and so
don't you have a pill for that?
I was like, oh, but mind you, as a producer, if a cast member had said to me, oh, I'm sick, I have pneumonia, I have a fever, I would have said, oh my God, yes, a fever. That can be dangerous. Pneumonia can be dangerous. You need to go take care of yourself. Or if one of my, just somebody that worked with me had said that, a colleague, I would have said, but I had such a responsibility to the work as opposed to making sure that I was also okay within that it was really hard for me to conceive not going to set. So eventually, though, after the doctor lectured me for 10 minutes, I realized it is really serious. And I went home, and I was so sick for 3 weeks. I struggled with a fever, and it was so awful. There's just, I don't know if you've ever had a fever to 102, 103, where it just feels like it's like your body is so hot and you don't even know if it's ever going to break. I felt like I was back in the day. I don't know if you ever watched Little House on the Prairie, and this could be dating me, but I felt like, oh my God, people die from fevers. Is it ever going to break?
Oh, that's awful.
And then when I came through it, I still, like, pneumonia takes a while to get out of your system, and my immune system was so compromised. And it was the first time that I really noticed what I had been doing to my body in the 20 plus years in choosing to maintain this grueling pace and not actually taking time to really balance. Because from there, I then went and saw a nutritionist, and the nutritionist, she did all these blood tests, and she came back and she's like, I don't even understand how you're actually living, because my levels were so low in all my vitamins, and I mean, it was to a point she was like, you're so malnourished, which, by the way, I'm malnourished. I'm working in TV where we have like all these fancy like catered meals, but yet I would never take time to really be in the space of just enjoying the meal because I was so busy just wanting to get the work done. The work came first as opposed to taking care of me and then the work. So when she said I was malnourished, I was like, this is okay. That's not good. And then from there, I had to really look at everything. And it was really, in some ways it's kind of embarrassing to admit that I somehow got to this level of being an adult, but I somehow am not really taking care of myself nutritionally, and I then have to admit it because when the blood work came back, it was just there. I mean, it was all there in my face, and the nutritionist was so, I mean, her face said it all. She's like, you really have to take care of yourself. This is not good. And it's not like, Christopher, it's not like I'm living in a third world country where I don't have access to, the foods to make sure that I'm nourished, because I do. And it's not like I wasn't, and then it's on that crazy pace where you're making money, but then it's like, what good is all this money if really health-wise it's taking a toll? And it really, it really came down to stress. I mean, it was all stress that was causing my immune system to just kind of wither. And so, anyway.
It's like you said earlier too, though. It was this, you got a job and that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to work. You're supposed to focus on this stuff. And there's exhilaration in there as well. I can see how you could get distracted by this, where these ordinary, everyday, I'm supposed to eat nutritional things, like you don't even think about it. You're just so focused on what you're doing and who you're supposed to be.
Well, that's what we're also taught as a society in our culture. It's what do you want to do when you want to grow up? Who do you want to be?
Yeah.
Do you want to be a lawyer, a doctor? What is your dreams? It's not, hey, I want to take care of myself fully. I want to be happy, in work, at home, have a healthy body. I mean, we talk about having a healthy body only in the aspect really of, looking good per se, but it's not so integrated in terms of our work and our personal space. Oftentimes we have that philosophy of, you leave your troubles at home. You come to work to focus. But really, how do you leave aspects of yourself at home when you're walking into the workplace? You're still the same person that you were at home.
It's so true. I think that's such old school thinking back, because I've heard that growing up in a career as well. Like, you go to work and you leave yourself, your personal stuff behind. Really? Do you?
Do you?
It's still with me. It's in my bag,
Yeah, and it's not like in college or even like, K through 12 that we've take these classes where it's, oh, okay, real world 101. And in real world 101, geez, I'm going to learn how to balance, my life, learn how to have, healthy, nutritious meals. I didn't even know how to cook getting out of college. No one really, where do you learn these skills?
Yeah.
And I just was so focused on work. And I think also in the last so many years, this whole to-go lifestyles happened where it is amazing that, all these grocery stores have these incredible to-go meals, which is great. But the problem is, though, you never really learn to take care of yourself because you put the time in at work. I'll work till 9, 10 p.m. and then I'll just get a to-go meal. So you're never really relaxing in your kitchen, just simply cooking a meal to take care of yourself. And at the same time, while you're cooking that meal, you're learning the value of what foods are healthy for your body.
It's so true. There's so much more to that simple act. It's so funny when you talk about the to go. That's totally my story. It would be me. I'm like, I'll work till 9. I'll grab something at Whole Foods, whatever. We'll be fine. But you're really right. Well, take me from that moment to the nutrition and all this stuff to your next step, which was, shifting from just TV producer to now co-founding the Dee Dee Jackson Foundation with the Jacksons. So help me bridge, like, what was next for you and how did that happen and what did that mean?
Well, there's a few steps. I once I was through, once I got back up on my feet from pneumonia, I then had to kind of look at what was happening in my life. And one day I decided, okay, I'm going to really start focusing in on creating better eating habits, which breaking a to-go eating habit is not easy. And, in reality TV, I was often on the road for years at a time. And I would spend like 3 months in a city. And I would then come home for like a couple weeks and then I would be off again. I mean, a couple years ago, I was only home for 3 weeks, not even consecutively. I was on the road that much. And by the way, I do love hotel living, which there's nothing better for me. Like when I go into a hotel and you smell that like hotel smell and you're like, oh, everything's going to be great. Someone's just going to completely take care of me. Like, I love it. I love it. But that also goes into this whole to-go lifestyle that we've kind of nurtured and created for ourselves, which then takes away from us really taking care of ourselves. And so I had to make a choice that I was not going to take any more shows on the road for a while, which as a reality TV producer, most of the shows are out of town at this point. When you're living in LA, they want you to go to Texas for 3 months or go to Oklahoma or go to North Carolina, which is amazing to experience. But I was like, I need to really change my life. So I had to turn down several, lucrative job offers, which that was difficult because you look at like, well, it's money. If I just do this one more show for this much money, then I'll be able to relax. But the problem is that then kept getting further and further away from me. And my immune system at that time was just so depleted. So I had to really be able to learn to say no. And
was that hard even to be able to do that?
It was so hard because as a storyteller and as a person that loves learning about people and people's real stories, there were some shows that came across my plate that I was like, oh my God, this is so interesting. And some of them were documentary series where I would have been able to find out all these interesting things and discover.
Yeah.
And so the story person in me wanted to go do it. But I was like, okay, I have to take care of the other 3/4 parts of me that's been so neglected. And so learning to say no was really difficult. And my agent did not really, at the time he was like, I don't really understand why you're turning down these offers. And eventually he got it because once I really started talking about my immune system, because who wants to talk about a compromised immune system with people that you could potentially work with? You might not then get a job, or I could eventually like lose the agent that's representing me.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you don't want to also lose that that potential, income, because again, our society is all about, the dollar, how much money are you making, what kind of work you're doing. Like my friends will ask me like, hey, what show are you doing? How many shows have you done? And so it's all about, we've conditioned ourselves to talk about work and money and the bottom line. So I had to completely learn to recondition myself in so many different areas. And number one was saying no to work outside of LA, which was so difficult. So I went a couple months, once I was up and healed from pneumonia, I went a couple months without work, which was really scary. Like, oh my God, am I never going to get another job again? Like, is there any jobs coming in LA? And then I got the call for the Jacksons, The Next Generation, that aired on Lifetime. And I got the show, and we shot it all in LA. We went to Amsterdam for a couple days, but that was fine because that kind of fit into, I can go away for 4 days, but then come back and be here for like 3 months. So that kind of fit in my new model of, what I wanted. But again, once it was all great during production, because I really kind of set a pace of, okay, I'm going to have a healthy work production week. But then once I got into post-production, like, I love story. I mean, I can just live with it. And I found again that I was working 18-hour days, 7 days a week. And I ended up, getting sick again. And I went to my doctor, and my doctor is like, this is all stress related. And, I then found, once again, I was, my new eating habits that I created for myself really went flying out the window, because I, again, was working 18-hour days, 7 days a week. And so I was reaching for the unhealthy food. I would let I wouldn't eat for so long that my blood sugar level would drop. And then I would just try and, just grab any kind of food just to kind of sustain and restabilize my body and my blood sugar level, which is so not healthy for your metabolism.
Sure. So what changed that then? What got you back?
Last year, so I went from working on the Jacksons, The Next Generation, and then I went on to another show. And during that show, I just saw how unhealthy the environment had become, not just for me, but for other people. And we were working on a show that was literally like 24, 7 days a week. And my hours were from like 1 p.m. to like 3 a.m. And I was driving home at like 3 a.m. and then getting a couple hours of sleep and then getting back up to go to work. And I felt like a zombie. And I saw all these producers just breaking down, crying, because they were so emotionally and physically exhausted. And I was just like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing? And when you get that emotionally and physically exhausted, you're not your best version of yourself at work. Like, the quality level of who you are just dissipates. And you find that you just have less patience, because your nervous system is at such a point of breaking that you just need to have calm and stillness and quiet, but you don't even have time to give yourself that. So you're pushing yourself to a point where you're out of patience and almost like out of breath, which then comes where people start, you see anger coming up, or you see like negative emotions where people are breaking down. And I just saw that behind the scenes. And I was like, I got to make a change. I got to get off this, like roller coaster. And so, while I had, when I was executive producing The Jacksons, The Next Generation, during that time, I was following Taj, Terrell, and TJ Jackson, and their mom had passed away over 20 years ago. And they'd always wanted to create a nonprofit in her name. And so for one of our storylines, one of the brothers, Taj, he was talking to me about, what he wanted to do, but he had said, there's no way the network is ever going to go for this, because, following a nonprofit isn't that interesting. And the previous executive producer that we had worked with on the pilot, she had immediately nixed it, saying, no, that's really boring and that's not television. And so, as soon as though he said it to me, I was like, yes, let's do it. And I just felt like, the story of, 3 people who had lost their mom and in some ways were still grieving for her in different ways was such a powerful story. that not only did it touch my heart, but I also really related to it, and it resonated so deeply because, 5 years ago, I lost my best friend, my college best friend, to cancer. And I realized on that show that I was still like in the process of grief from losing my best friend to cancer. And I looked back to 5 years before, and I realized that I had been working hard and I'd been working long hours, but what I didn't realize was I was running away from my grief, because 5 years before I was on a show, and when my best friend Jeremy called me to basically say goodbye, it that goodbye call hit me so hard. The next day he passed away. And when he passed away, I had felt feelings that I'd never felt before. Sure, I felt sadness. Sure, I felt, just emotions that come from loss, but I never felt grief before. And I never felt how complicated grief was. And I found that I would all of a sudden be in a coffee shop and I would start crying because I couldn't imagine that someone who was my age was just gone.
Yeah.
And nobody had actually, I feel like I just was never talked to about loss and grief and how to actually handle it. And so what I did was, I was already a workaholic. I threw myself into work even more. I took a show that was that not only worked 7 days a week, 18 hours, but was such an intense pace for over almost a year. I worked on the first season of X Factor, and I chose it for a few reasons. One, my friend who had died loved music, and I thought that being on a music competition show would be an amazing way to honor him. But two, I also took it because I knew it was going to put me on the road for a while and it was going to keep me busy. But what I didn't realize was that I was repressing all these deep emotions. And so for 5 years, I was running away from my grief. And so, there it was. I'd just come through pneumonia. I made a decision about not going on the road, and I'm in San Fernando Valley with Taj Terrell and TJ Jackson, and we're talking about their mom passing away, and I connected to their story of grief so deeply because I realized that's really what was going on with me, that I had all this hurt and pain from this loss that I wasn't facing, and that I was trying to basically just use work to heal and run away from this pain. And so when I realized that, I was like, okay, if I'm feeling this way and I'm here with 3 other people that feel this way, there's got to be other people out there like us. So when Taj said, I really want to start a nonprofit, my mom, it just clicked with me where I was like, yes, we're going to do it. And Taj was like, there's no way the network's going to say yes. But I just felt it so deep in my heart that it just was so needed, not just for me and them, but just the world, because we're just not taught about how to handle loss and grief. And so,
was the nonprofit really to focus on helping people understand that grief and how to work through it?
Yes, it was. So what happened was the network originally said, I went to them 7 times and they said no to actually doing an episode on their story about their mom and the nonprofit. And so it almost looked like we weren't going to be able to do it. But eventually I figured out a way to really connect the network into seeing the greater possibility. And they said yes. And, it's like from a business perspective, I understand because they have to look at like, what's going to really resonate for ratings potentially. But for me in my heart, I felt like the story was so powerful that it was going to be a really good episode. And it ended up being one of the highest rated episodes. And it just was a real amazing, compelling story that came from the heart and was so inspiring. And through it, we were able to create the nonprofit, the D.G. Jackson Foundation. And our mission ended up being we shine a light on loss and grief and how it impacts our lives negatively, especially in children. And we bring resources and a community so no one feels alone in their grief. And throughout it, we figured out that we needed to create resources that could help not only children, but also adults. And we did that in two ways. We created a music therapy program for children that allows them to express their loss and grief through song, and the songs are recorded. And it's amazing to see the children kind of move through the 6 or 8 week program. And then we created a radio show, The Power of Love, that airs worldwide. And, it's that community is like, it's a community of adults listening and sharing stories. And it's really, really powerful. We have everyday people that come on and tell their stories, as well as, all kinds of experts. And it's really just to talk about loss and grief. And for me, it was a really profound experience, not just creating the episode as an executive producer, but also just co-founding a nonprofit on a reality show, because I often feel like reality shows can have just, there's negativity about them. Like, oh, there's so much bias, and people don't really understand how, they watch TV, but that doesn't mean they actually understand what goes into make TV and some of these like real stories. And yes, there's a lot of shows that aren't so great, scripted and not scripted. But then there are some other amazing stories that come out scripted and not scripted. And so for me to actually have co-founded a nonprofit on a reality show, I just think it's amazing. And I think it's, and it's also telling of the possibilities of what we really can do in terms of storytelling and helping people. But what ended up happening was, I co-founded it on the reality show, and then I went on to do another show, because that's what you do as a reality TV producer. We drop into people's lives for a couple months, and then we say, okay, thank you very much, see you later, and we move on to the next one. So I moved on to the next one, but then next thing you know, I'm working like 1 p.m. to like 3 a.m., and all these producers around me are just, they're just in shambles, melting down from the hours and just the physical exhaustion of it all. And I was like, what am I doing? And I could feel myself getting sick again. And so I had to make another big decision in my life, like, what am I going to do? And so I decided that, 2016 is going to be a transition year. And that decision came really because one day I opened up my refrigerator and I saw that I had water in there. That's it. I just had water. I'm like, oh my goodness. Like, I spent all this money on a nutritionist and I have water.
Well, you do have half of the ingredients for coffee.
Right? And I didn't even have coffee in my house or milk. So I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, literally, like, why am I wasting all this money on doctors and nutritionists if I'm not even applying it? Which, as a producer, all you do is apply.
Yeah.
But then I opened up my freezer and I was like, oh, okay, I have a frozen pizza. Oh, great. Let me make a frozen pizza. Oh my God, Christopher, my oven didn't even work. My oven didn't work. And I was talking to a friend afterwards on the phone saying, yeah, my oven doesn't work. And she's like, well, yeah, I don't think it's worked for a couple of years, because I was at your house a couple of years ago and it wasn't working. And I realized, oh my God, she's right. My oven hasn't worked in 2 years.
Can I just ask, because you've had a lot of, like, just through the stories too, there's like these big milestones of like, oh yeah, I got to fix this. Then you go back to the show. Oh, I got to stop this thing? What am I doing? And now you're at this point where you're like, I have water, a frozen pizza, and no working oven. Was it at this point, and I don't laugh, it's not like laughing at you because I get it. Like we have these moments of like, no, I'm going to fix that. No, I'm going to get it to that. But like you talk about 2016, like, was this your like, was this the aha where it connected for you to be like, no, like this is real now. I'm stopping this. I'm going to focus in this other space and I'm going to jump us forward to health a little bit. But like, was this like a breaking point for you to get you into another space?
Absolutely. That was my moment of realizing what my life has become. That was it. I mean, I was so, I just was so, I was so appalled by how my personal life was looking, and I wanted to mask it for people. Oh, life is great. Everything's amazing. I'm doing amazing.
I love that you just said that because I think so many people do that. I've been guilty of doing some of that. Like, I'm not going to tell you about the other stuff. I'll tell you about the really good stuff.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you about the real stuff. I mean, it was, I had a moment in my kitchen going, okay, I am 44 years old. I have water in my fridge and my oven does not work. How can I take care of myself? How am I properly adulting?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. And, and it's like, I want to have, it's like, I do want to get married and have a family one day. And I keep saying one day, I'm like, I can't even take care of myself. How am I one day going to take care of my family?
They can live on water.
I'm like, wow, this is so, and it's like, as an executive producer, it's like you don't even want to admit it because my job as a producer is to execute and connect the dots and to deliver something from beginning to end. So why wasn't I delivering my own personal life to myself?
Jump me forward a little bit to from working through the with the foundation doing. I know that you were the interim director for I think it was a year. Can
I tell you one other story though first?
Sure.
Because this was like another moment that I had that I realized I had to change my life. Once I realized the Britter and once I realized that I only had water as well as a frozen pizza and unable to use my oven, I immediately called someone to come fix my oven. But during that time of waiting, I went to the grocery store. And as I got the grocery cart and I started walking down the aisles, I realized I hadn't been in a grocery store to really grocery shop in probably over a year. And I'm walking down the aisles and I literally felt like I was an alien in some other space. I didn't even really know what to buy or what ingredients would really go together. And it's not like I've never cooked because I cooked a lot in my 20s. I used to make Thanksgiving dinners for 20 people. I used to menu plan. But once I got into my 30s and really was in my career, I just didn't focus on it anymore. And so when you don't focus on something like cooking, which is an art, you do lose your way.
Yeah.
So here I am in a grocery store. One of the most basic things that we've done all our lives. You go to the grocery store with your parents. How many times have you gone? Right? Mm-hmm. But if you don't really pay attention, how do you really know what to buy? So I'm walking mindlessly around these aisles going, I don't even know what to buy. And so I just started throwing things in the grocery cart. And I ended up getting home and I had all this food. I'm like, oh, look, I'm so proud of myself. I have all this food in my fridge. Look at me. I'm on track now. No, not really. I still had to learn how to cook again. But really, it was about I had to learn how to break the habit of to-go lifestyle. Mm-hmm. I had to break the habit of when a friend would call me and say, hey, you want to go to breakfast? Yeah, I'll go to breakfast. Sure. Okay, look at me. The nutritionist said that her only goal for me was to actually eat. So I'm like, look at me, I'm eating. Okay, check that off the box. I did that well. And then I'd come home and a friend would say, hey, want to go out to lunch? Sure, I'll go out to lunch. Yeah. But meanwhile, I'm spending all this money on other people cooking for me, and I'm still not learning how to actually take care of myself, which was the whole point for the nutritionist.
Yeah.
that I'd spent a lot of money for. And so I was like, oh my God, I need to learn how to cook, really learn how to cook, not just like menu plan and make this big Thanksgiving meal for people, but daily cook. How do you daily cook and how do you break the habit of to go meals? And so I started, this January, and it was difficult because it was so much easier just going to the local cafe for eggs than actually buying the eggs myself and cooking. But I did it, and I made some of my meals in the beginning were not so great. And I definitely, I still had the trying to break the habit was difficult. But then a friend of mine turned me on to the food delivery services like Plated and Blue Apron.
Yeah.
And three of my friends gifted me with different boxes from the different services. And I found like, wow, these recipes are really easy to follow. The food's delivered to me and I make the food. And what's amazing is a year later, I now understand how to cook and how to take care of myself. And so I started really enjoying cooking, and I would put on a podcast or some music, and I just started learning how to cook, but really take care of myself. And that to me has been the best part of all of it, is that now a year later, I feel so healthy and I feel so balanced, but it took a lot to actually break the habits. You know how they say 21 days to break a habit?
Sure.
Ha! It was not 21 days to break a habit. I still struggle sometimes, but I'm getting better. And the thing is, I've just given myself permission to learn and be at that space of, yep, that's okay. I'm here, and laugh. I've laughed at myself. I'm kind of like I Love Lucy in the kitchen, and I'm okay with it. I'm okay that I'm good at other areas and I'm learning in some other ones. And this is a growing phase and I'm okay with it. And in terms of making that leap, though, it really was, once I took that last show in 2015, coming into 2016, I was like, I need to make a huge change. And so, I chose then this year to really focus on my health. I had an opportunity then to become interim executive director of the D.G. Jackson Foundation. And since, I'm a co-founder, I really felt like it was a place that I needed to be. And it was incredible. It was an incredible experience to really kind of create something from ground up, but also to be able to allow myself then the space and time to be more at home and to really have opportunities to focus on myself, to learn those aspects that I needed.
And it sounds like you took also after that year of, learning in that space, flashing back to learning how to cook again, understanding the health of that. It makes me think like you have this new approach, and I know that we've talked about this earlier too, like kind of like where you're at today. You've melded all this knowledge and space and experience. That's actually what I really think about. You have like you've lived it. That's why we laughed a little bit. Like you had all these milestones that were like, oh, I should change it. Oh, I should change life. But like it's, I think what's powerful about that stuff is it's real. Like people really go through that. Like, oh, you don't have one aha and you wake up and you're like, ta-da, I'll be amazing tomorrow. But you have these ups and downs. So maybe you could talk about like a little bit of where you're at today, like how you're pulling those spaces together and what's next for you.
So I do realize that I had to integrate it. And I think that's probably what I really took this year to do. And I didn't know that when you're working so much, you don't allow yourself the time and the space to actually process the emotions. And so I was repressing so many emotions just from all kinds of different experiences. One from, losing my friend, but also other things. I ended up, besides learning how to cook this year, through the foundation, I ended up taking this grief recovery method that was a 7-week program where I actually learned to process loss and grief. And it was pretty amazing. I didn't realize how much loss can affect us in our lives. And it can be loss from things where you graduate, from high school and you're going into the real world. That can be loss and grief because you're excited about, graduating, but then you're sad about leaving that structured environment. And that sadness is actually grief that we're not taught to process. And so I took this method and I really learned these amazing tools. And, at the same time, over the last, like, I don't even know, 20 years, I've taken a lot of different classes from Landmark to like mindful meditation classes, to all these different self-help. And I've read a lot of different books, and I've talked to a lot of different people, but I wasn't actually integrating it fully into my space, because once I got into work, I would lose everything. And so what I realize now is that through my own story of learning integration, that possibly now this could be something that help others. I'm now going to be creating the space called Inspiring You, where people are going to be sharing, their stories, and I'm also going to be sharing my story even more in depth of what I've done and what I still am doing and what's working, as well as just other tools and insights that could potentially help people in their life. Because I feel like we just need more practical tools and tips, and that there's so many things out there for us, from books or just, all these programs. But I think being a reality TV producer, I have a way of packaging something that comes from more of the interpersonal side that connects the dots. And I want to share that with more people. And I'm really excited about that end of it now.
I love that it's the packaging part too that you talked about, because I think the world is full. It's tons of that kind of resources out there. Some great, some maybe not so great. And there's a lot of aspirational, there's a lot of this kind of stuff. And there's some powerful things, like you and I talked about, like even Simon Sinek, like we both really enjoy him. But I think that what's so interesting about your story is that you can make it like tangible. You can make these tools and resources available in a new way. That's because you live it. And I think that's where so much value. Like I see, keep going back to all your experiences about like those habits, like you talked about, it took more than 21 days. Like, I just think that's going to be really powerful for you to pull it together. Because I thought about this, Henri, about like, well, what makes it different than everybody else's? And I think it's like, yours is real. Like you have like, it's founded in like, no, let me tell you the real stuff. Like, this is how it really happens. And here's some great tools you can use with it. So I think that's great.
Thank you. I think even with, giving yourself permission to be in the beginner's mind and just allow yourself to learn. Because even if you're at a certain age, I think we put these markers on ourselves and this pressure that, we have to be this, we have to be that. You know what? It's okay wherever you are. And it's okay just to allow yourself to learn. And once I gave myself that permission, there was a new freedom. And I think also, right now, a lot of people are gravitating towards meditation. And I've had a meditation practice for 20 years, but it's a practice. And I got to tell you, Christopher, there's some weeks where, I meditate every day, but then there's some weeks where I don't know what it is. Meditation is so good for you, your mind, body, spirit, everything. But sometimes like I resist it and I'm in the flow of these negative emotions and I can't seem to sit myself down for 5 minutes and then I have to reset somehow. And I find that, maybe through cooking helps me now reset, or giving myself permission to go on a walk and listening to a book on tape helps me reset. And so I'm less I'm kind of less rigid with myself, like, oh my God, you have to do this, because it's a discipline. I'm okay where I am, and meditation is amazing, and I'm so grateful for the tool, but sometimes I just have to be in the flow of where I am, and that's okay. And you know what? Maybe I'll go to it tomorrow.
I think that's really good advice for others as well. Like even as you talked about like the new blog and website Inspiring You, like I kind of see like maybe that's some of that advice you offer. Like, hey, here's the meditation. This is the powerful stuff. But The truth is it doesn't have to be 100%, right? You go with the flow. And I think I haven't heard advice like that before. Like, maybe you have to, it's ebb and flow. And so I think that could be really powerful if you're sharing that perspective as well.
Well, I also realize too, we all talk about how we're not perfect, which, yeah, we're all not perfect. And, in the course of one year, I sometimes will do 40-day straight meditations, and it's amazing. And I feel really centered and incredible. But then all of a sudden I'll do 40 days of meditation, and that meditation will end, and I'll continue doing mindful meditation for a couple of weeks. But then all of a sudden, one day I'll get up and I realize like, oh, a couple of days have gone by without meditation. And I've had to learn to give myself permission. Like, it's okay to be in that flow. It doesn't mean that you're still not into meditation, or you're a good meditator, or, oh, now out of your practice, the discipline. And because I think we've also conditioned ourselves to kind of have this self, critic.
Yes.
Oh, if you're not doing this, you're not on par, which is also, in taking the time this year, I've realized how loud my self-critic is. And so I've really had to dive deep then in terms of my own self-worth, which I think we don't like to also talk about our self-worth and our self-love. And you know what? When I'm working 18-hour days, 7 days a week, how is that actually self-love?
Yeah.
How is that actually helping my own self-worth?
I think even just asking that question, that's the point. Because that's the facing the reality of it. Like, oh, maybe I'm actually not doing it.
Because it's uncomfortable too.
Oh, totally. Because you have to be real. That you can't hide from your own self.
Yeah, who wants to admit some of these things? And I'm like, you know what? And I think, to me, I was at such a breaking point where I'm like, I don't want to get sick like this again. Yeah. And something has to change. And that something is deep within me. Because I also realized, like, I wasn't really happy. And people say, like, oh, it's like if you don't have inner peace and inner happiness, like, when are you going to find it? It's not going to magically all of a sudden, like, poof, it's here. You have to actually unravel it to heal, to find that place again. And I think after my year-long sabbatical from reality TV, I have so much inner peace and inner happiness. You know what? My bank account might not be as abundantly as flowing as it was when I was in reality TV, but the abundance I have in terms of inner peace and inner happiness, and the realization of how to actually work my life now, it's priceless. It's priceless. And these tools I now can take with me because I have a different value of myself. And I think that's really what I had to learn this year, was the value of myself. And what really prompted that was the deep inner healing of the loss and grief that I didn't even know was affecting me. And people, I also learned that, when you go through breakups of relationships, divorces, you lose jobs, all of that is loss and grief. Mm-hmm. And we don't talk about that as a society. And that's definitely something part of I want to talk about with Inspiring You. And really, I want to talk about the whole health approach, because it's not just, your physical body that needs healing. It's also your mental, your emotional, your spiritual. And I think we have such a stigma on mental health, and nobody really they don't really want to talk about depression or anxiety, because then you could be labeled. But we all have anxiety and stress in some level. Right. So why don't we kind of reframe how we actually look at it and put it more as a positive spin that, you know what, your body's just telling you something. So, hey, let's listen to those emotions and connect with it and figure out a way to allow it to move through the body in a healthy way. So that way you don't get sick at the end of the day and deplete yourself. So then you're living a more fulfilled life, which is something we all want to do. We all want some sort of a fulfillment and make some sort of an impact, whether it's in just our personal family life or the extended community. But the thing is, those words don't really mean anything unless you're actually rolling up your sleeves to actually walk the walk, not just talk the talk. And I think for me, for years and years, I kind of was just talking the talk in between the shows. And my body broke down enough to tell me, like, hey, you got to change. And you know what? I'm glad. I'm glad for that moment of pneumonia. I'm glad when I opened my refrigerator to see only the water. I'm glad my oven, wasn't working, because all those things just showed me signs of like, oh, I'm not taking care of my home life. And hey, let's take care of this. And let's actually be positive with myself that I can see it, instead of beating myself up for not doing something I should have done in the past. Because I think also, I realized this year how often I get caught up in, oh, well, if I would have done that, some time ago, then I wouldn't be in this space. Like, why can't I just give myself permission to be okay where I am, and to give myself more like just gratitude and positive thoughts instead of beating myself up?
And I think that's super powerful, because it's true. Like and also if you wouldn't have done things the way you did them, you wouldn't be where you're at today and who knows where you would have done, maybe it would have taken you longer. You shared a lot of really, I think, interesting perspectives too, just the ups and downs, the different way that you're getting to kind of that conscious decision making and centered whole life. If listeners only remember one thing you said today, like what's the thing they should take away out of all of this? Like maybe somebody's feeling a little lost, or they're in this moment of I don't know what. What's something you would say, just remember this one thing?
That you are absolutely okay where you are. And I think that there's such a great blessing in feeling lost, because I felt lost last year. And I was at the top of the mountain. I was an executive producer. I was like, look, world, I did it. But I feel now through this year, like I found myself. And I think being lost is a greater blessing than people realize. And I think also taking the time to allow yourself just to move through it and not feeling so rushed. And one of the things I have learned just through mindful meditation is to focus on my breath. And I do find that when I'm in a state of feeling stress or anxiety, just the simpleness of, okay, let me just give myself permission to set the timer for a minute, and I'm going to focus on my breath. And yes, you'll have all kinds of thoughts that come in and out. Then that's okay. The thought comes in, just go back to the breath. The thought comes in again, go back to the breath. And it's not, you'll never fully concentrate on your breath. It's just a tool to allow yourself to move through it. And just giving yourself that 1 minute just to simply recenter yourself to your breath, which is your life force, that can make a world of difference in your day.
I think in addition to that one piece you're talking about, like feeling lost, like it's actually more powerful than you think. It's actually really good to do that, which I'm a big believer in. I've had that last couple of years of feeling those way, in some of those reactions. But I'm also taking away permission. You talked about permission a few times, and I think you're so right. Like self-critic, I am a huge self-critic. I've been doing that for a long time. I think some of it's healthy because it makes you look at things a different way, but you have to know where to pause. And it's the permission. I think we all have to remember that. Permission to take care of ourselves, to pause, to permission to do things differently. I think that's so powerful. Like that really hit home for me, Henri.
I love that. And I think also permission to self-love.
That's harder to do than we think.
Well, we've become a society that, you love outside of yourself first, and then you put yourself, you focus then on yourself after. And we're always kind of, even with, dating and romance and marriage, it's like you're putting yourself outside of love. But it really starts with you first.
Yep.
You learning to love and appreciate yourself and just your being now, where you're at. Like, it's okay. It can be messy. You can be in the throes of, depression right now, anxiety, sadness, wherever you are. Or you could be on the top of the mountain feeling really high about your life. Whatever it is, it's like just loving yourself for where you are and giving yourself permission to continue moving forward. and just loving yourself.
That's so
So
good.
that way you can love others as well.
Absolutely.
In a more in a more authentic, healthy way.
So if people want to follow along, and I know that Inspiring You isn't quite up yet, but I know you are in the throes of bringing it to life, where else can they find you online if they want to follow along with some of your stories or just some of the things that you share?
We have a Instagram page, and it's inspiringyou.co. And then we also have a Facebook, which is inspiringyou.co.
Wonderful. We will definitely add those to the show notes and share them out with everybody on our website.
Thank you so much.
This has been so terrific. Seriously, I just, we talked earlier and I knew your story, and you know this. I was fascinated by it all, and I love this journey you've been on. And what hit me home, or really home for me, was that it wasn't like an end story. It wasn't. You reversed it. I really kind of love that. Like, no, I already had that. I already got to the top of the mountain. And I think this resonates. So thank you so much for sharing kind of this evolution you've been on.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the show this week. What'd you think? Great story? Any new ideas? If you're new to the show, subscribe to receive a new episode each week automatically. And if you love the show and you want to help us out, go tell a friend about it. Then go write us a quick review on iTunes. Both of these favors really help us get the word out. If you want to follow along with me and see behind the scenes fun and more, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at @MeChristopher. That's MECHRISTOPHER. To get even more inspiration and updates, follow Accidental Information on Instagram and Facebook at Accidental Information, and on Twitter at Accidental Info. We also post original articles about following your passions and getting creative, and more information about each episode at accidentalinformation.com. Thanks for joining me this week. Now let's keep chatting online, and then I will talk to you again next week.